and welcome back to another video. This is American English with this guy. I'm this guy. The goal of this channel is to help you improve your English, and the goal of today's video is to help you with your listening comprehension. Today I'm going to tell a story about how my wife and my son are both in quarantine for 14 days. And as I was going through what I wanted to say, I think there will be a lot of work today with prepositions. Before I get too far into the story, I do want to take notice of my t-shirt. Lots of support from Brazil for this channel, so wanted to show my support for Brazil. And I have a couple other country flags coming in that I'll be wearing in future videos. But yeah, my wife and my son are both in quarantine, and I want to talk a little bit about how that happened. We have this agency, we have this group, it's a government group called the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and they have recommendations or they have suggestions, and those two words are basically the same. To recommend something, to suggest. Well, they have guidelines that if you come in close contact, that's the phrase we're using, close contact with someone who has tested positive for the virus, you will have to quarantine. Now, what does close contact mean? Close contact means to be within 6 feet of someone who has tested positive, and the time is 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. So if you are living with someone, of course that's way more than 15 minutes. But the way my son had to quarantine is that he plays hockey and his coach tested positive for the virus. And he had a game, and of course he was within 6 feet of his coach for 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a continuous 15 minutes. It could be 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, another 5 minutes somewhere else, but it has to be within 24 hours. And during his game, he was definitely within 6 feet of his coach for a period of at least 15 minutes. The crazy thing about how his coach knew he was positive was he had to take tests to play on this golf course, and he loves to play golf, so he gets tests almost every week, sometimes more. And in fact, this week it was more. He took a test on Saturday so he could play golf. It was negative. He took a test on Tuesday. He felt great, but the test came back positive. Therefore, he had to let everyone know who he had been in contact with for the last 24 hours, 15 minutes, and that included my son. Now, my son was in close contact, but the other three in my family, myself, my daughter, and my wife, we don't count. It would only be if my son tests positive, then we would have to quarantine. But it's only that close contact. So we didn't have to quarantine. The next question might be, well, why is your wife quarantining? Well, I am a teacher. My wife is a teacher. We are in close contact with students every day. And one of her students tested positive for the virus. Therefore, she has to quarantine for 14 days. And it doesn't matter if she gets a negative test, she still has to quarantine. Now, if either of them develop symptoms for the coronavirus, then the CDC says to start counting 10 days. So you test positive for the virus, you have to quarantine for 10 days. If you don't test positive, you have to quarantine for 14 days, just in case you might develop symptoms. So if you want to get out of quarantine more quickly, you want to test positive for the virus. But unfortunately, that means you might get very sick, which is what happened to my wife's student. He was running a very high temperature, or sometimes we call that a fever, at about 102 degrees, which is pretty high for a 13-year-old, which he is. So his mom and dad took him to be tested. He tested positive. The school had to call about 40 people who had close contact with that student, many other students, and all of his teachers. One more little unrelated topic, and that is the presidential election here in the United States. I don't know how much you know about this, but if you're thinking we should know who our president is by now, which is a few days after the election, it's okay. This has happened before. The new president, if Joe Biden wins, or Donald Trump's second term, that does not take place until January 20th at noon. That's been happening not since the beginning of this country, but for the last, I don't know, at least 50 years, I think, maybe more. So that's why our election is in November, but the new term doesn't start in January, just in case there are really close elections. In 2000, when President Bush was running against Vice President Gore, we didn't know for about a month, and it actually went to the Supreme Court to figure out who the winner was. I do think this might get pretty messy. There will probably be some recounts in certain states where some ballots or some votes have to be counted again or recounted. But I do believe we will know exactly who our next president is by January 20th. I also want to give a shout out to Bob the Canadian. He has been very generous to this channel. He gives me a lot of shout outs on his channel, Bob's Short English Lessons, where he does short English lessons 4 days a week, and they're awesome. There is a link to his channel in the description box. Check it out. It's good stuff. I hope this has helped you with your listening comprehension. If something was unclear, feel free. Listen to it a couple times, rewind that part that was difficult, ask any questions you might have in the comments section, and I'll get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.